It's only been a week. The rush of being home and rapid fading, failing to recall what I was missing all that time in England. Has sent me aimlessly on foot or by the help of transportation to knock on windows where a friend no longer live. I had forgotten. And everywhere I go, there's always something to remind me of another place in time, where love that traveled far had found me. We stayed outside till 2, waiting for the light to come back. We didn't talk, I knew, until you asked what I was thinking. Until you asked what I was thinking. Brave men tell the truth. The wise man's fools are analogies and puzzles. The woman holds her tongue, knowing silence will speak for her. Brave men tell the truth. The wise man's tools are analogies and puzzles. The woman holds her tongue, knowing silence will speak for her. Will speak for her. And everywhere I go, there's always something to.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are connecting from today. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you all have a restful and great weekend. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. If you are connected live right now in any of our social media channels, please let us know where you're connecting from. Just put it in the chat. Just let us know where in the world you are tuning in from. That would be great to know. If you are tuning in for the first time to our Hacking HR live chat series, well, we're live right now. If you're watching the recording later on, well, it's a recorded version, but all of the live sessions that we've had before, all of the live chat series that we've had before, they are all posted on our website. So you can go to hackinghr.io and check them all out. We have great, great conversations, amazing insights from a lot of brilliant and talented authors who are coming to our series to share their ideas, their insights, their recommendations with the community. This is we're recording this in May, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And if you don't know yet, and I'm sure you probably know already, we've been doing a lot of stuff in Hacking HR on all things mental health. We launched last week our Hacking HR May series, all things mental health. We have about 20 sessions, all related to anything about mental health. Today, right after this, we're going to have a session. And this week, we have, I think, 2 more. And then we have more the rest of the weeks in this month. And of course, we will continue to do this. But this month is especially important just because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And most of our Hacking HR live chat series as well, most of the conversations that I'm going to have with authors during this month are about mental health. Just this week alone, we have 9 conversations on our live chat series. And I'm hoping that you try to tune in as much as you can. If you can't, of course, again, we're recording everything. But all I want to make sure is that you are encouraged. of course, to do a couple of things. Number one, to take action to improve your own mental health and your own well being. And if you are tasked with doing some of this in your workplace, whether you work in HR or you are a leader, that by tuning in these conversations, you get the tools and the insights you need to be better, to be a better advocate for mental health and well being. So I am hoping that all of you are excited about the conversations that we have this week. So we're going to be talking about anxiously attached, and I am super excited to welcome Jessica to the screen right now. Hello, Jessica. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Excited to launch this week's Hacking HR Live Chat series with you. This is the first of the week. And for people who are tuning in right now or who are watching the replay, Jessica, can you please let us know more about you, who you are, the work you've done, and why you wrote this book, Anxiously Attached?
Sure. I'm a psychotherapist. And I have a practice here in Palm Beach, Florida, and a coaching business. And I specialize in family systems work, codependency, attachment theory, trauma, and addiction. And I've been doing this work for almost 15 years. And I have a lot of training in interpersonal neurobiology and imago therapy, which is a special couples training. And I started working in the field a lot with addiction, and I started working a lot with family systems and codependency, particularly. And then I moved to couples and relational issues, and I became fascinated with different relationships and our attachment and how that gets played out. And I was seeing a lot of things happen in my private practice. And I also share in my book a little bit about my personal life. That was about how to kind of have healthier relationships and about your attachment style and how your attachment style affects your relationship dynamic as well as your partner's attachment style. So when I started to see this growth and change, not only for me personally, but also in my practice, I decided to write a book. And that was roughly 4 years ago, but it just hit print in June. It's doing really well. And it's helping a lot of people who are struggling with why they are struggling in relationships to heal.
Oh, that is fantastic. Can you tell us more about the book? And of course, I got a million questions for you, but I would love the audience to have a big picture about what the book is about.
So the book is really about anxious attachment, but also anxious and avoidant attachment in their dynamic, and how to really kind of look at your behaviors as adaptive strategies, and then kind of like in a layman's kind of way, talks about interpersonal neurobiology and how you have adaptive strategies and how we are all wired for connection using Stephen Porges's work. And when we're not in connection or our partner's shutting down or things are happening, why our nervous system is activated, and how to work towards what my method of becoming more self-full, which means, having a healthier relationship with self, and how to kind of heal so that you can have healthier relationships with others. So the book packs in a lot. It has somatic practices in it and meditations. And really, you walk away understanding not only attachment theory, but your nervous system, polyvagal, somatic work. You walk away with a path towards your own healing. So it won't heal you, but it will open up the door to start the healing process and kind of change your perspective on yourself so that you don't have so much shame around your behaviors in relational patterns.
Healing is hard stuff, huh? I have spoken with a bunch of authors who come to the live chat series, and we talk about how hard it is to heal from trauma, from experiences, from even how your own styles kind of shape the way you, at least in this case, connect with others. So healing is hard stuff, huh?
Healing is really hard, and I don't want to discourage people. The thing that I'll have to say about healing is healing's not done alone. So our nervous system, if it was wounded early on, which is usually the case, and people don't have access or understand memory in that way, but that healing is never done alone, and healing is in essence, facing some of your own suffering in the presence of someone who can help support you, so that that suffering or that avoidance doesn't make conscious decisions in your life anymore. It doesn't lead you to pick certain partners, or because our unconscious wounds or our, the things that we're scared of feeling are the things that we avoid in our life, and we make a lot of decisions, whether it's people pleasing or other behaviors that are all trying to protect us. And so when we start healing, we have to face some of our inner world, and it is really beautiful and deepening, and absolutely can be an unfolding that is hard, and scary without the right support.
What do you tell people when they come to you and they tell you, Jessica, I have tried so many different things to heal, to not let this trauma, these unconscious behaviors to dominate my life, my conscious decisions, my relationships with others, but it's so hard, and I'm not seeing change. What do you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, so when our nervous system responds and we get triggered or awakened or activated, whatever you want to call it, it's not about like stopping that process because that's automatic. Um, it's about becoming more and more aware and developing more and more compassion as to why we're having the responses that we are. And neuroplasticity or change takes time. And so just the fact that someone is saying, I'm healing and I'm seeing this and it's really, really hard, they're already on the path of awareness, at least.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot of time and a lot of holding and a lot of understanding to shift, but it is very much worth it.
And it is what's the role of acknowledging or celebrating sort of those small successes that you see, when you notice when somebody comes to you and says, hey, Jessica, I used to behave in this way, and I'm noticing that now I'm not responding in this or that way. I'm responding in a healthier way, or in a way that is more effective when I'm coping or confronting whatever situation. Is there a role in celebrating those small successes?
Absolutely. We would call that like expanding your window of tolerance. So as you start to heal, you have more inner resources. And so in more awareness, and there are good days and bad days, right? We all have them, and certain inner cues and outer cues that can set us off. But you might, as you heal, you might say, okay, now I have different levels of awareness and I have different choices. My system isn't responding as fast, or it's not getting as dysregulated, because with anxiously attached people, and I'll focus on that, is that the missing developmental link there is self-regulation. So if we didn't get enough co-regulation from our primary caregivers, and that's like attuning and feeling a sense of safety and connection, we didn't develop the ability to self-regulate as adults. So when we're healing, we're co-regulating with our therapist or our coach or someone really that's holding that space and helping us heal. And as that happens, we internalize that, and we develop slowly the ability to have more of an ability to self-regulate and have more inner resources to handle stressors as they come up.
Yeah, this is fascinating, and I want to get into attachment theory in a second. To go deeper into the book now. But as you were writing the book, which you started writing 4 years ago, like you said before, what were maybe one or two things that you discovered in the process of writing the book that you either didn't know about before, or that were really kind of shocking to you when you were writing and discovering and doing your research to write about the book?
Oh God, that's a good question, because when I first start the first manuscript, it was very different. And so as I continued to learn, I decided that I wanted to include somatic. So you include the body and include polyvagal. So that came later on. So the nervous system and how the nervous system responds. And I got a mentor in the middle of that. And, just it. So writing a book doesn't happen alone. Healing doesn't happen alone. Reaching out for support is actually how we heal. We're so much more needing each other in this world. So that idea of being independent is so wrong. We need to be interdependent. And so I took on the book by myself. And the more I let in the right people to help guide me and help edit and help teach me, the more I reached out and asked for help, the more I got to the manuscript that I wanted. And that is so metaphoric for healing. And what our culture teaches us is that you have to be independent and you have to do it on your own and you should figure it out. And it's so not true. Nothing great is created on your own. That's how I believe. There's been so many different energies and hands, even from my publishers. And just this concept of healing with other people is really the metaphor of like how the book came about, because I healed through the process of reaching out for help and support as I was writing this manuscript several times.
Oh, that is fantastic. Is there a paradox in when you think about reaching out to other people, connecting to other people, getting help from other people, and getting attached to them, or becoming more anxiously attached to them? Is there a paradox in there, or an irony, so to speak, or is there a way to balance? Uh, to have a healthy balance between reaching out to other people but not becoming anxiously attached to that kind of support that they are giving you.
Yeah, so I think that, there is a paradox, I guess, in that the more that you reach out to healthy people, the more they show up for you and the less anxious you are. So
Oh,
you start to trust that they're going to respond and that they have your best interest in heart, and you spread your dependency out. So it becomes interdependency. And so once you learn, oh, this person, is reliable and they care and they're in the right place and they're relatively responsive, and your anxiety actually goes down.
mm,
It's when you reach out to the wrong people, or people are inconsistent or can't show up, and those people are just not for you.
mm,
So it's about finding the right people to lean on, and I think that is metaphoric in that anxious people tend to pick avoidant people, and there's nothing wrong with avoidant people. They get a really bad rap, but they can't be the people in which we can depend on enough to build what we need. So if we depend on secure people or people who are reliable, we actually become less anxious over time. So learning who to depend on is really
mm.
important.
I know I want to ask you a question, and I know there can be a blanket statement here, but I'll still ask it, right? And it's a two-part question. It's a question about trust, when your trust has been broken, perhaps with people or by people that you thought were the right people for you, whether on your personal, romantic life, emotional life, your family, your coworkers. So that's part number two, and part number one, and part number two, kind of like the same question is. So what do we tell people? We always hear this thing of don't expect anything from anybody, right? Like don't have expectations, because you will be disappointed or frustrated or whatever. So what's your response in both cases, right? That the case of trust and the case of that, uh, motto of don't have expectations from anybody.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the motto of don't have expectations from anyone. That's coming from a very wounded place. And that's
Mm,
coming from a protective place of I can't trust anyone.
mm,
And so that's a learned behavior, and it's a protector. And whoever you learn that from literally is trying their best to give you the advice that they can give you. And that's your paradigm. And I would really caution anyone who's listening that that paradigm is just a paradigm and it's not actually the truth. We can trust and depend on a lot of people. And there are a lot of really healthy people out there that we form these communities with, and that we need community and we need to trust people within reason. And it kind of goes back to
mm,
circles back to your first question. I think when trust has been broken in a relationship or in life, what has helped me personally and professionally is starting to look at the neuroscience and interpersonal neurobiology, and learning that different people have different capacities. And sometimes people do really horrible things and they're really, really wounded themselves. And when
yeah.
we start to understand each other's wounding and their behaviors, we start to say, wow, that really makes sense. They're in survival mode, or they're desperate, or they're manipulating, or they're lying, but look at what they're covering up within them. And look at how
Mm,
they're operating in their life. And look at, and when we start to see that, we start to see that they're a very wounded person
mm,
themselves, and that our expectations might have need to be changed, or there's a lesson in this around self-love or self-worth, or learning to like kind of look at ourselves and who we trust and what we disclose to. And we've all been there. We've all trusted someone and been betrayed or been
mm,
hurt, and kind of then looking at how their patterns are and what their dysfunction are, and how they adapted to survive, kind of gives a compassionate lens to where their wounding is. And I think when we start to look at people like that, we start to see that most people are doing the best they can, even when they do horrible things. It
mm.
actually makes sense when you start to look at their background and how they developed, and setting boundaries with them, or learning how to have appropriate expectations, that some people are just don't have the capacity
Yeah.
to show up in a healthy way, to take ownership, to take responsibility because of what's going on in their inner world, or what they haven't faced within themselves yet.
And I am thinking about patience in the context of this conversation, right? And especially if you're the helper, if you're the person who has been reached out to provide that support to that person that is wounded and on a journey of healing. and how you have to see that relationship as something that is going to take time to to produce perhaps the kind of healthy results or positive results that you're trying to achieve. Because otherwise, if you're trying to help somebody change overnight, that's just not going to happen.
Absolutely, and we're not perfect either. And
Yeah.
rupture repair, so like triggers, conflict, whatever you want to call it, like that exists in the context of a therapist or a coach relationship. And so that's really important in terms of helping clients understand, like, we get activated, we get touched,
Mhm.
we're another person, and having these really open dialogues of like, let's talk about what's going on inside both of us, and what are the expectations, because it's not a therapist's job to fix you, it's a therapist's job to hold you and
Mhm.
to help you in your own experience connect the dots to what's really going on, really understand memory, really understand sensation in your body, work with your body, and not to like make you feel better, but to help you deepen in the space within you to make everything make more sense and to develop a capacity to be with yourself more. So it can be frustrating in that, triggers or relational issues are going to show up with you and your therapist or your coach, and they should, because that's where there's a container for growth, mutual understanding, and empathy can arise
Mhm.
in that close therapeutic relationship.
Oh, that's fascinating. Now, Jessica, I got a bunch of questions about the book, but we've been, working on so many different topics. But now I want to ask you to go a little deeper into attachment theory. Can you let us know more about what that is, and perhaps even more than what it is, how it plays out in our daily lives? Like how do we know, hey, I am attached, I am anxiously attached, or I am building a healthy connection with somebody else?
Yeah. And so I think that, so many different ways to answer that. So those who are listening, attachment theories has been around since the 1950s, and it's a
Mm,
study on how we attach to our primary caregiver. And so much of this is nervous system to nervous system. So a
mm,
lot of like your attachment style is not even something you can recognize. You could say I had the perfect mom or the perfect dad. And if they were anxious or if they were depressed or if they were in survival mode, your system is going to mirror and adapt to their system. And there's four different categories. There's secure, which have a more inherent sense of self-worth. They don't feel invaded on, and they don't feel like they're going to get abandoned. So they have really
mm,
easy time getting close and moving away because they just have a healthier sense of self that was established. Their parents were mirroring them. They were seeing into them. They saw them as separate entities. They were curious about them. There was a lot of attunement, and co-regulation was really great. And then you have the insecure type. So there's fearful, avoidant, and anxious. And all that means is that like there's some dysregulation that happens and some fear around attachment, depending on where you fit on that spectrum. And so you can become a little bit like an anxious person is a little bit of fear of abandonment. They have more codependency traits.
mhm,
They adapted by abandoning themselves and tracking the needs
mm,
of others to survive. So they can tell you what somebody else is feeling in the room sometimes before they can feel what's going on for themselves. And that's a beautiful adaptive strategy. An avoidant person can sometimes they shut down and they become islands and they lack empathy at times in extreme cases, and they didn't weren't seen into emotionally as much as children. So avoidant and anxious tend to attract each other. And then there's what scientifically we refer to as disorganized, and so they have a trouble getting close and they have a trouble with space. They're very confused, and there
mm,
sometimes is some abuse or sexual trauma or different things that happen when you're younger that can cause that. And so attachment is a two-way street. So it's your nervous system and your adaptive patterns in combination with who you're attaching to that form the relational patterns and how that dance looks. And so you can show up more secure with a friend or more anxious with a friend and more avoidant in love because it's a
mm,
combination of two different people's patterns and how that plays out. Usually you have a baseline of whether you give yourself away, you monitor others, you're more quote unquote codependent, or you lean into more kind of selfish, which is seen as bad, but it's really an adaptive strategy that is born out of survival. Really selfish people are not happy either because we're born
mm,
to be in co-regulation and interdependency. So if we're an island, we're not connecting and we're pretty lonely. And if we're giving ourselves away, we're self-abandoning and we're not happy. Both of those are sympathetic states of survival. Neither one of them are in a ventral state of connection and safety and meeting your needs and flexibility, and boundary systems are very different on both sides. So I really unpack all of that in the book, but understanding that, they're all adaptive strategies that are born of survival brilliantly. And once you kind of see yourself in that lens, and even your partner, you already start to shift in compassion, in knowing that their behaviors are coming from a fear state as well.
Yeah. Are these behaviors are the decisions of these behaviors happening at a conscious or an unconscious level, or both?
Well, both. And, a lot of our population is happening at an unconscious level, which can be really frustrating, especially when you're in it and you see it and the person is unconsciously avoiding and running away and working and doing all these things, and you're on the receiving end of that. And I think it's our work, if we're so lucky in this lifetime, to become conscious. And that's where healing comes in. And that's where actually looking at yourself, like if you're listening and there's some patterns that are on repeat in your life, that's an opportunity to say, hey, like, what is going on inside of me that I keep repeating something? It's causing me pain. It's making me miserable. It might be time to start healing and looking inward. And many people who are externally focused don't even realize that there's a whole internal world in there that's dictating their lives and their adaptive strategies. So it's a mixed bag. I would say you're a really lucky person if you have some awareness to knowing some of these behaviors, because many people are just operating unconsciously.
And it's frustrating for not only for the receiver of those behaviors, but for the person who is aware after the fact that he or she engaged in those behaviors, right? Something along the lines of, you respond to somebody, your partner, for example, in a romantic relationship, right? You respond in one way, and then, hours later or days later, you think, wow, like I did this and that's not how I wanted to respond, or that's not how I wanted to react. But, you're only aware of that after the fact. So can that be,
I would
frustrating?
I would say that's like a big part of the process. I think that sometimes couples, especially because the response is so fast, right? That you can shift to anger, you can shift to avoidance so fast that you're not going to catch it in the moment, and you're going to
Yeah.
repeat the pattern over and over again. But if later you can say, wow, this was really going on to me, and you come back to the table, there's a huge opportunity for repair. And when you start to look at your abandonment or your fear, and you start to really unpack that and bring that to your partner, your behaviors start to make sense, and it actually starts to shift very slowly. So it's not that we become aware and we change. It's becoming aware. Sometimes we still mess up. We come back to the table, we take ownership, we start to dive deeper, start to have different conversations. And it's a journey of that awareness kind of eventually leading to what we call dual awareness. So when we feel enough, when we have that awareness, the reaction might happen. At the same time, we might have space in our brain for an observer to be in there and possibly choose different. So that takes time. That's neuroplasticity. That takes time. But the first step is, wow, I keep making the same mistake over and over again. Now I need to explain to my partner where this really comes from and what I might need. And it might happen 100 more times, but that's the process of change.
Oh, that is fascinating. How does this play out in the workplace? I don't know if you've gone too deep into how, not only attachment theory, but all the nuances that you've been talking about on the styles. How do they play out in work relationships?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. So, it doesn't have to be a romantic partner. A romantic partner
Yeah.
is likely to bring up your most intimate, and the deeper the bond, the deeper the wounds. But in the work situation, same thing. I mean, you hand your power away. Your boss could have positive and negative traits. This is another imago theory of your primary caregiver. So you don't even realize that your boss is like your mom, or your boss is like your dad. And what's getting activated in you is a portal or a window to actually do some of your own work. And it kind of can shift the dynamics. But we pick people, and if you're having extreme sensational reactions in your body, those are memories. And so when we have those responses or those triggers or those awakenings, we can use that as information when we're doing our own inner work. And anyone that you're really closely attached to is likely to awaken something in you because they're important. And so it happens everywhere. It's all around. I mean, and attachment is so important because when you start to do this work, you realize that all of your relationships start to improve and how you interact in them start to change.
Now, how do we approach this in the workplace, for example, right? And I ask you this because a lot of our most of our audience are people from HR, and more often than not, they are not professional, experts in the space of mental health or therapy, but they still want to have the positive impact on people. So what's our role then, at work? How can we first of all recognize some patterns, and second, maybe if there's like a first step beyond or before asking somebody or recommending professional support, what can we do?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I know that, there are clinicians that do imago and provide imago therapy for corporations, but I would say if someone's really activated in the workplace and it's clear for the person in HR, they might need individual therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is looking at the culture and the leader, and recognizing, what is really within the I guess the staff member who is being activated and how is this dynamic being played out, and maybe bringing awareness to what might be theirs and what might be the boss's responsibility or the culture's responsibility, or acknowledging or making shifts. And I don't really have the best answer for that because it's so layered and complicated, but
Yeah.
just knowing there's more to meet the eye, there's more to the situation than what's actually happening in the here and now. Usually there's many layers to why someone is responding or having these more complicated relationships in the workplace.
Yeah, and I am thinking about, well, a couple of things. Number one, sort of removing the stigma that these things happen to all of us, and they are in one way or another. We behave in one extreme or the other, or somewhere in between, but we all are, uh, in the same boat, so to speak, or in a similar boat. And second is providing also the resources for people to acknowledge that when somebody responds in one way, there's more than meets the eye, right? It is not that maybe somebody, it's upset at you or whatever, right? It's that there's gotta be something deeper going on in there.
Yeah, I mean, a good example, I can give myself as an example. So, a long time ago, it's not happening for me recently in my life. I brought on a therapist to work for me, and I was tough, and I can be direct, and through our interactions, just you remind me of my mother.
Mm.
You come off really critical, and I looked at that, but also like anything I said, even if it was like you forgot to write your notes, would kick up a lot of shame for her. And so, we both really struggled in that I couldn't really be a boss, and because everything I said and went through the lens of me kind of criticizing her. So it became a dynamic that was really challenging. And so you kind of want to look at like what's coming up for me that reminds me of my family of origin. What is mine to heal? And looking back, I could have been a kinder boss at the time. I was very stressed out, and I can be very direct. And to people who are really sensitive, it can be really hard. So I've shifted a lot of that.
Mhm.
And I don't know if everybody in every company is gonna like if this would agree with them, but I run a company with like 4 therapists and other people in it, and I've shared a little bit of what's going on in my world with them, and they share a little bit of what's going on in their world. So we all know that we're human. And so
Mhm.
your boss is human, who you're dealing with is human. They're having bad days, they have good days, they're going through their own life experiences. You can't personalize everything. And so by letting them into my world and vice versa, we tend to have more compassion that there's more going on. And I know people will say there are that might be boundary crossing, but I really think it depends on the company and what you're doing. And in some situations like mine, all my therapists who work for me, I know what's going on in their personal life. They know what's going on in mine, and we're really aware because just having that compassion that I have one therapist that her mom passed. Like just knowing what's going on in each other's lives builds cohesion and understanding, and it also like it puts me back into like, hey, you guys, I'm just a human just like you, and we're all. And so building that is important, but I understand that wouldn't help be helpful for every company.
Yeah. No, and I find it fascinating, by the way, because one thing that we have talked a lot about in our community is compassion at work, right? It is that understanding that, I mean, number one, you don't have to agree on everything. You don't have to understand everything that everybody's going through, but understanding, having a threshold of understanding, right? Having a minimum understanding of what your team members, your leaders are going through, create creates the opportunities for compassion and creates the opportunities for healthier connections and relationships with them. Um, I don't know why though. Sometimes I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me. I am such an imperfect person, always demanding perfection from from others, and it's frustrating because then I realize that I'm doing this. Like I'm like, how the heck am I asking this person to do this if I don't do it myself? Like that's so unfair. But
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes don't realize that when I am engaging in that thing. It's after the fact, and I'm thinking what immediately comes to my mind is compassion, compassion, compassion.
I learned, and I'll say this openly, like I've learned so much about managing people by understanding every single person that works for me is different and they have their strengths and their weaknesses. And I have to have compassion for what's going on in their lives and still be able to be like, hey, you made a mistake over here, and
Yeah,
how to navigate all of that. And yeah, compassion. And, someone put in the chat, like the environment has to be psychologically safe. And I think that, as a leader, as someone who's grown in helping people with attachment and even people who come into a group practice or, to a company, your attachment stuff comes up. So feeling safe to be yourself, feeling safe to make mistakes,
yeah,
learning to speak up for your needs, not being a people pleaser, creating that environment comes from the person who's leading the whole thing. And if you
yeah,
can lead by example, that compassion usually gets and that safety kind of filters out, and you can tell
yeah.
companies that are built that way and ones that aren't.
Yeah, no, and for me, there's a component of trust, and I'm gonna put that in the context of what you just said, right? You as the leader, you want to be compassionate, but you're also the leader. You want to guide
Yeah.
people, you want to coach them, you have to tell them when something has gone wrong and it needs fixing. But that happens effectively when you have built the trust with that person, right? If they see you, um, as the boss who never understands what they're going through, who never has empathy, who never has compassion, who never acts with kindness, that the filtering of that message of there's something going wrong here and we got to fix it because it's about work, I think it's challenged by how they see you as a person. And that's why we've talked a lot about this in our community, how being a human leader, a leader who puts people first, who cares about the person, is also a good leader that builds more highly performing teams that are more effective with high productivity, because you have that element of humanity first, and that is just so powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't apply to everything, but I mean, carry a caseload, and so I understand, and anybody who's in a leader position, if you've been wherever your staff is, you have like this inner understanding of rolling up your sleeves and being in every kind of, and I think that that's really important. And yeah, like having that compassion and understanding, and that sometimes that's comes from, for me, an example is having compassion for myself.
Mhm.
The more compassion for myself, my mistakes, my mood, the more I have compassion for others. And so there's a mirroring that goes on when you do your own healing and your own inner work, that the more you kind of know and treat yourself differently, the more likely you are to treat others differently. And so that's one beautiful byproduct of healing, is that it deepens all of your relationships.
Yeah, I love that. Jessica, as we're getting closer to the end of our chat, I want to ask you a couple of questions. One, if you can talk about somatic experiences or practices, I'm sorry, that you talked about in the beginning as part of the healing journey. And the other one, and I think it may be related, but probably not. Um, we're born hardwired for empathy, and research tells us this, right? For kindness, for compassion, but all of that is taken out of us, throughout school, when we are set up for competition rather than collaboration, when we are set up for individualism rather than collectivism, and at work is kind of the same thing. And now we're trying to teach people how to be humans again. So if there was one thing, maybe one or two things that you can tell people with these one or two things, you can build healthier connections. You can become more kind and compassionate towards each other in life and work. What would one or those things be, right? To do that and to become human again, and that together with some of those somatic practices that you talked about in the beginning.
Sure. So, in healing trauma and attachment kind of issues, you can't not work with the body. So, when we start to talk about
Yeah.
somatics, we start to know that our embedded trauma lives in our tissues, in our gut, in our heart. It
Yeah.
lives in our body. And so, some of the practices in the book are about going into the body and allowing the sensations to come up to be held and hopefully received by another person's nervous system, truly, because that really helps the healing process. So, and there's a body keeps the score, and there's all this. I don't need to go into like how much evidence that when you're healing trauma, healing with thought alone is not going to work. We must access the sensational experiences in the body. And the safer that we feel in the presence of the right human being's nervous system, the more the embedded sensational experiences in the body will float up to the surface for us to do more healing. That's why it's like a messy unfolding journey process. And the other thing that you are touching on is actually something I'm working on right now. Is that
Writing the next book, Jessica? Is that the next book?
yeah. The next book is really about survival mode and
Nice.
getting out of So some people aren't born with empathy, first of all, and as a natural capacity. But we all have most of us have a natural capacity for empathy, and we are very much a culture that is fixated on like busy, productive, capitalism, me versus we, greed, just like over, this individualized paradigm that we're born into. And it's very left hemisphere shifted. And so what happens is, as a baby, if our parents are living in a stress mode, or again, this does go back to attachment, but if their system is stressed out and their paradigm is you must work hard and everything's a competition, and or maybe it's intergenerational trauma where you come from an immigrant background or your parents were in the Holocaust. There's epigenetics involved. So we're growing up in a world where we're getting culturally, but also in our nervous system, the message of we must survive. And that is very left hemisphere. And so many of us become fragmented, disjointed, disembodied, and we are kind of trying to just do what we need to excel. And it's very much programmed to look beautiful, be successful, and and it leads to a very meaningless life that feels pretty empty, and there can be a big void inside. So a lot of the work is to shift into healing, which is more in the right hemisphere of where we store in implicit streams of information and embedded trauma, and it's connected to our body. And that's where the somatic work comes in. And when you do the shift, which is why healing can be really hard, you have to face all your suffering in order to also experience joy and expansion and, other things. So shifting into healing is moving out of the place of survival mode and into a place of a deepening within yourself. And so that could be an undoing of what we are culturally and intergenerationally passed down through our nervous system, through our belief system, through the paradigm in which we're born into. And so it takes a lot of work to kind of break that. And but it's so worth it. And life is supposed to be full of joy and expansion. And if you're worried about, listen, there's a lot of people out there that are worried about paying the bills, that it's really valid. But if you're just climbing the corporate ladder and you're feeling empty, then, there might be a call to a paradigm shift, because life is not about being super successful. Life is about the quality of the relationships that you allow in, and community, and creating from a place that feels heartfelt and purposeful. And I mean, that's what I've come to believe. And so, shifting from that place means a lot of work, but also means that life becomes very much more rewarding.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I can't wait for the next book and have another conversation. Jessica, thank you so much for being here with me, with our community,
Thank
sharing
you.
all of your insights. Everybody go and get the book in the platform that you use to buy your books, Anxiously Attached. Great conversation, Jessica. This was amazing. Thank you so much for,
Welcome.
once again, for sharing all of these insights with me, with the community. And everybody, stay tuned. We have many more conversations coming up as part of our Hacking HR Live Chat series, as part of our Hacking HR May series, and this month all dedicated to mental health. So Jessica, you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much. And everybody, I will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.